Virtually all of us have been the victims of something affectionately known as paralysis by analysis, or the paradox of choice. This is basically a nifty way of saying that we have a tendency to overthink situations in our lives. We've all been there. We're stuck in a situation where a very important decision has to be made, be it our school major, a job opportunity, or relationship stuff, and we just can't get ourselves to choose one way or the other. This is a very common problem. It could also be a decision about what we're going to do on a given day. I'm sure everyone remembers this legendary SpongeBob SquarePants clip.
What do you want to do today?
I don't know. What do you want to do today?
I don't know. What do you want to do today?
I don't know. What do you want to do today?
David Foster Wallace, author of many things, including Infinite Jest, often spoke about his addictive relationship to television. He once mentioned that television was a tough thing because whenever he'd find something to watch, he'd suddenly become paranoid that there was something even more entertaining on another channel. And so he'd flip through the channels to find something else, only again to be met with the terror that there might be something more entertaining on yet another channel.
Well, particularly if you have a remote control, see, when that happens, you go to a different channel. And if you don't like that channel, you go to a different channel. And one of the reasons I can't own a TV is I've started having this thing where I become convinced there's something really good on another channel.
You get the idea. There's a such thing as overthinking ourselves into oblivion. I submit here that some of the most passive people in the world are those who have spent the most time thinking. This is counterintuitive since we generally believe that those who are able to make quick decisions are the ones who really know what they want. But this isn't necessarily the case. It could be the case that the most thoughtful people are those who constantly tell their boyfriend or wife that they can decide what to eat on a given night, or they can decide which movie the two are going to watch. Sometimes the process of decision making is so painful and so psychologically taxing that we just want someone else to make the decisions for us. Constantly being forced to make decisions can sometimes feel like a prison sentence, with no way out, no matter what we do. The 20th century French existentialist thinker Jean-Paul Sartre understood the misery of having to make decisions, day after day. If Sartre were still around today, I think he'd probably agree that the cost of increased freedom in the world comes with a steep cost, namely the horror of consistently having to make potentially life-altering decisions on a daily basis. It's like waking up every single morning to find yourself slacklining high above an infinite abyss that's just waiting to swallow you up at the first sign of a decision made. Sartre famously said that mankind is condemned to be free. In other words, we are wholly responsible for everything we do. That's fucking terrifying. But this is the cost of living in a part of the world where there's something of a premium put on personal freedoms. It's nice to not have to live under an authoritarian form of government, but it's not so nice suffocating beneath the waters of our own choices. To add insult to injury, there's more to the struggle of decision making than just, making decisions. There's also the close ties depression and suicidal ideation have with the inability to effectively make decisions for ourselves. Studies have shown that those who suffer from major depression often have a much harder time making decisions than someone who is free of depression. This makes perfect sense, since many who struggle with depression often feel somewhat apathetic to the way life is playing out for them. When the world doesn't feel like home, and when what we do doesn't fulfill us, it's natural to ask what the point of doing anything really is. The same goes for suicidal ideation. Those who struggle with depression often have to lug around the burden of suicidal thoughts, which is sometimes an outcropping of having concluded that life simply isn't worth living. Albert Camus kicked off his famous essay entitled The Myth of Sisyphus by writing, "There is but one truly serious philosophical problem, and that is suicide. Judging whether life is or is not worth living amounts to answering the fundamental question of philosophy. All the rest, whether or not the world has 3 dimensions, whether the mind has 9 or 12 categories, comes afterwards. These are games. One must first answer." Decision-making in a world that's hyper-focused on productivity is a near perfect recipe for creating a depressed population. In the United States, and probably elsewhere, there's not a whole lot of emphasis put on leisure. Those who don't have specific utility in the world are perceived as deadweight. And when someone eventually realizes that they were brought up to be a mere cog in the wheel of productivity, the secretion of depression seeps in, and it can be a huge mess. But there are strategies we can use to push back against paralysis by analysis, again otherwise known as the paradox of choice. One optimal strategy is to put a limit on the options we actually have. It's probably easier to make a decision when we only have 2 items to choose from, as opposed to, say, 50 items. Sometimes decision-making is just a numbers game. It's not always possible to limit our choices, but when it is, it's often a lifesaver. The second strategy is to fully understand the objective of our decisions. If I want to make a living by writing books, I need to make decisions in my life that will ultimately flow into that objective. It wouldn't be an optimal decision to spend most of my free time playing video games and partying on the weekends. These choices wouldn't really help me achieve my goal of making a living writing books. Again, this doesn't apply to every situation, but it's very helpful in certain circumstances. The most helpful strategy, at least in my experience, is simply asking for help. If there's a big decision you're afraid to make by yourself, draw someone into the decision-making process with you. Someone you trust, and someone you don't believe would ever lead you astray. This could be a parent, a friend, intimate partner, or even a stranger. There's an immense amount of psychological relief in knowing that someone has helped us make a decision. A big part of the burden is lifted when we ask someone for help. And a doubly good part about this strategy is that the person we ask will likely feel appreciated that we came to them for help. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Don't be ashamed to ask for help. There's a toll to be paid for living in a free society, where we have relative control over what happens in our life. Nero had the backbreaking choice of blue and red. Our decisions are probably not going to manifest in such a binary way, but the fact remains, we must choose.